Today, we are going to work on the Topic 8 review. Please make sure you're following along and that you circle any questions you're not understanding or not sure of so you can ask me after you're done. Number 1. After a bake sale, only 2/3 pie remains. What fraction is equivalent to 2/3? I have 2/3. Remember, for a fraction to be equivalent, we need to multiply both sides by the same number. I know 1/3 is not going to work because I can't multiply anything to get 1/3. 3/3 is not going to work because 2/3 is not a whole. So my options are 2/6 and 4/6. Well, 2/6 is not going to work because 2 is my numerator. And I would multiply 2 times 1 to get 2. And I would not multiply 6 times 1 to get 3. That wouldn't make sense. So let's see if 4/6 works. So I'm going to write 4/6 over here. Remember, if I have to multiply by the same number, then it's equivalent. Well, I know that 2 times 2 is 4 and 3 times 2 is 6. I am multiplying both sides by 2, which is equal to 1, which would make this equivalent. So 4/6 is the correct answer. Number 2. Leslie will use more than 1/2 cup but less than 1 whole cup of flour for a recipe. What fraction of a cup might Leslie use? Explain. So we need to find a fraction that is greater than a half but less than a whole. So a fraction that I know that is greater than a half would be any number that is greater than half on top. So for example, if I use the number 6, let's say, I know that 3/6 would be a half and that 6/6 would be a whole. So I need a number between 3/6 and 6/6. So I know 4/6 would work or 5/6. Let's use 5/6. 5/6 is greater than a half but less than a whole. So I'm going to write down 5/6 and I'm going to write down that 5/6 is greater than 1/2, and I'm just going to use 1 divided by 2, but less than 1 whole. There we go. If I had to explain more, I would say that I know 3/6 is a half, and so 5/6 would be greater. All right, number 3. Danielle said she read half of a book. Select all the fractions that are equivalent to 1/2. Well, I know that with 1/2, the numerator, it will be half the amount of the denominator. And 3/6 would work because 3 is half of 6. 5/10 would work because 5 is half of 10. 6/12 would work because 6 is half of 12. 3/5 and 6/8 will not work because 3 is not half of 5 and 6 is not half of 8. Number 4. Explain how to use division to find an equivalent fraction for 9/12. Well, I'm just going to do it over here because I have more room. So if I have 9/12 and I need to divide, you just have to find a factor that will go in both 9 and 12. And I know that 9 and 12 are both factors of 3, or 3 is a factor of 9 and 12. 9 and 12 are multiples of 3. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And so my answer is going to be 3/4. So 3/4 is an equivalent fraction to 9/12 by using division. Number 5. Draw lines to match each fraction on the left to the equivalent fraction on the right. I'm going to start with 2/3. Remember, to have an equivalent fraction, we need to multiply or divide the same number by both sides. So I'm going to look at my choices and see. I have 10/6, 6/8, 2/5, 8/12, and 3/5. If I multiply both sides by 4, 2 times 4 is 8, and 3 times 4 is 12. So I am going to get 8/12. Now I have 6/10. Well, if I look on at my options on my right, if I divide both sides by 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I'm going to get 3/5. Now I have 20 over 12. Well, 20 is greater than 12. So look on the right. There's only one fraction where the top number is greater than the bottom number. And I have 10/6. And if I divide both sides by 2, I'm going to get 10/6. Now I have 4/10 and 3/4. I know if I divide both sides by 2, I'm going to get 2/5 for 4/10. And for my last one, I know if I multiply 3/4 both sides by 2, I'm going to get 6/8. All right, number 6. You're going to have a question just like this on your test. So please pay close attention. We're going to compare 1/2 and write each fraction in the correct answer space. All right, first we have 5 over 1. And with 5 over 1, we know that that number is going to be greater than a whole. So it's definitely going to be greater than a half. So my answer, 5/4, is going to go over here. Now I have 5/10. Well, I know that 5 is half of 10, so 5/10 is going to go into my half. All right, then I have 2/12. Whoops, sorry about that. And I know that half of 12 is 6, and 2 is less than half. So this one is going to go in less than. So 2/12 would go in the less than half. So now we have 6/12. Whoops. Let me erase that. Now we have 6/12. And I know that 6 is half of 12. So 6/12 would go into equal to a half. Next, I have 3/8. And I know that 4/8 would be half, so this would be less. So 4/8 would go right here. And last, I have 2/3. And I know that 2/3, half of 3 is 1 1/2. So 2/3 would be greater than a half. So 2/3 is going to go into the greater than half. Numbers 7a through 7d, choose yes or no to tell if the fraction is greater than 3/5. Well, I know that 3/5 is going to be greater than a half because half of 5 is 2.5. So 3/10 is less than a half. So no, it's not going to be greater. And if you're not sure, you can test out the theory by using the trick I taught you. So we have 3/5 and we have 3/10. Well, I know that 10 times 3 is 30 and 5 times 3 is 15. Therefore, 3/5 is going to be greater, not 3/10. I also know that 3/8 is less than a half, so no, that one's also not going to be greater. But if you want to check it out, you can. 5/3. Well, since 5 is greater than 3, this number is going to be greater than a whole. So yes, it's going to be greater than my fraction. And same with 6/6. Since this is a whole, this is going to be greater. All right, number 8. The Sahas are reading a best-selling novel as a family. After the first week, they checked in with each other to see how much of the book they each read. Well, we want to know who read the greatest fraction of the book. So I'm going to look at these fractions and see which ones are greater than a half. Well, I know that with 2/6, half of 6 is 3. So this is going to be less than a half that Mr. Saha read. Also, I can see that 1/3 is going to be less than a half. So I have 3/4 and 2/3, which are both greater than a half. And I have to see which one's bigger. So I'm going to write 3/4 and 2/3. Since I know that they're both greater than a half, I'm going to cross multiply. And I know 4 times 2 is 8, and 3 times 3 is 9. So I know that 3/4 is greater than 2/3. So Maddie, I'll write that in black so you can see it, read the most. Now, we want to see the two family members that read the same fraction of the book. So we have 2/6, 1/3, 3/4 and 2/3. Well, we know that 3/4 and 2/3 are not equivalent. So if I take 1/3 and 2/6, so if I have 1/3 and 2/6, if I multiply both sides by 2, 1/3, 1 times 2 is 2, and 3 times 2 is 6. So I know that 1/3 is equivalent to 2/6. So Mr. and Mrs. Saha read the same amount. All right, we are on number 9. Johnny found a fraction equivalent to the one shown by the point on the number line. Which fraction could Johnny have found? Well, we have 4/8. The only fraction that is equivalent to 4/8 is going to be 1/2, because I know 4 is half of 8. The rest of the fractions are not going to be equivalent to 1/2. Bill and Gina each ate 1/2 of their own pizza. Bill ate more pizza than Gina. Draw a picture to explain how that is possible. So if we have Bill's pizza, let's put here, and Gina's pizza, if they each ate half, whoops, I'm going to fix that, sorry. I'm going to redraw Gina's pizza. I'm going to make it red. I'm going to draw a blue line in the middle. If they each ate half, how did Bill eat more than Gina? Well, Bill had a bigger pizza. So if they both ate half, but Bill ate more, then his pizza had to have been bigger. Number 11. Use multiplication to find an equivalent fraction for 1/3. Well, you can multiply 1/3 by any number. Let's multiply both sides by 4. So if we multiply both sides by 4, we would get 4/12. But you can really use any number as long as you use the same number. All right, number 12. Only one of the comparisons below is correct. Which one is correct? Well, is 1/2 greater than 2/3? No, because 2/3 would be greater than 1/2. 1/2 is not equal to 3/5 because 3 is not half of 5. We need to figure out if 4/5 is greater than 3/4 or if 2/3 is greater than 3/4. Well, I'm going to use the trick that I taught you. So we have 3/4 and 4/5. If we multiply across, 3 times 5 is 15 and 4 times 4 is 16. So 4/5 would be greater. So this is the only one that's correct. You could check out the other one if you wanted to. So we could say 3/4 and 2/3. Well, 3 times 3 is 9, and 4 times 2 is 8. So 3/4 would be bigger. So we are correct. Only C works. All right, and our last one. We need to use one as a benchmark to compare 6/5 and 5/6. Well, I know that 6/5 is going to be greater than 5/6 because 6/5 is greater than 1 and 5/6 is less than 1. 6/6 would be 1. So if there's ever a number on top that's bigger than the bottom, you know that it is greater than 1. If the number on top or the numerator is less than the denominator or less than the bottom number, you know it is less than 1. Go back through and circle any numbers that you're unsure of, and then come see me.